Welcome back to Abilene People, our podcast here on BigCountryHomepage.com, where we talk to Abilene's most interesting people, and we certainly have one of those today. He is Joshua Ohlemacher, who is a recently announced candidate for Texas House District 71. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Hey, appreciate you having me.
Hey, appreciate you coming. So you and I just met.
Yeah.
We talked briefly on the phone, but you have a website for your campaign.
I do.
And the number that's on that website is a phone you carry.
Yeah, no, it rings straight to me. If somebody needs to get a hold of me.
Because I thought, well, I'll call somebody in his office. And so you probably don't have much of an office in terms of a streamlined staff. It's you,
No,
man.
not for the campaign. It's me. It's my wife. It's some friends and family that are helping out with stuff.
All right. Well, we're going to get to that and why it is you're running for this office. But I want to know a little bit about you personally. Where are you from? Where were you raised? Where'd you go to school? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll take it all the way back to the beginning. My dad was in the Air Force. His first assignment was at Lackland Air Force Base. So I was born on Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. We were there till I was about 7 years old. From there, we went to Incirlik Air Base in Turkey for 2 years. After that, we were at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City for few years, and afterwards came to Abilene. I was 13 or so at the time, and the nature of moving around and meeting different people and having small groups of friends, and then you move and everybody moves on. Abilene was definitely the first place where I feel like we made friends that I still have today. That was his second to last assignment. From there, we went back to San Antonio. And while I was there, I think I was 16 when we moved back. While I was there, it was, work a little job, save up some gas money, drive back to Abilene and couch surf with some friends, because this is what we had already kind of decided was home. My parents at that time were already talking about when he retired from the Air Force, moving back to Abilene. I took a job with HEB down there, moved with HEB from San Antonio up north of the Austin area. During that time, my now wife and I started dating. She was in that group of friends that I'd made here. Her dad was actually my middle school basketball coach when we lived here the first time.
So she's from Abilene.
She grew up in Merkel, yeah. And so we had gotten married and we were living in Leander. During that time, my dad retired from the Air Force. They moved back up here. They live down in View. And we had our first child and really quickly found out we were expecting our second. And suddenly the career path I was on didn't seem to be matching the timeline of how my family was growing. And so I was looking for something different, and was at a basketball tournament in Dallas watching my little brother play basketball, and had a lady walk up to me after a game, and she said, "Hey," she said, "you're Chris's son, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Okay, well, if you've got a job, or I've got a job for you if you want to move back to Abilene."
Wow.
And complete act of God. I mean, it was just one of those, hey, yeah, it was going to be back home. It was going to be more money. And for people trying to move back to Abilene, sometimes that's not always really an option to find something better than what you've got in the big city to come back home. And so that was in February of 2015. By the beginning of May, we had packed everything up, and I'd left HEB and moved up here and took a job. And that was, May of 2015. So we've been back here a little over 10 years now.
So this career change happens and you come back to Abilene.
Yeah.
But the last 10 years you've been here, my understanding is you've been managing projects and all. Are you in construction, or what is it you do?
Yeah. So the job that I came back for, what I got hired to do was safety management. I work for a HVAC, electrical and plumbing company out in Ty. We do a lot of work for the federal government, a lot of work for Dyess Air Force Base, and they wanted somebody to kind of help manage, the paperwork side, but kind of the personnel side as well when it comes to safety.
You don't do the electric and the plumbing.
No, I'm not a tradesperson by any means.
The HVAC, but you do the safety management or the project management.
That's what I came on originally with safety, and then it branched out from there, from safety into broader project management as well. And so I've learned a lot in the trades over the last 10 years. But, I'm not the guy when it comes to plumbing, I break more stuff at my house than I actually fix.
See, I've been having a breaker problem, and I need a breaker replaced. I was going to ask you, hey, what are you doing after this podcast?
Hey, I'll take a stab at it, and I've got people to call if I can't make it work.
If you'll take a stab at it, you're better off than me, because I will not when it comes to electric.
Sure.
Okay, so I want to get into a little bit of what your platform is, as you've talked about it publicly, at least on your website. But if you don't mind me framing it this way, why in the world do you want to run for, not that it's a bad gig, but it doesn't pay a lot and takes a lot of travel, for Texas representative for District 71? Why do you want to do that, and this being your first foray into politics?
So, specifically because I feel like I'm called to do it.
What does that mean?
I can explain. I've been interested in politics for a long time. I've always thought of myself as fairly politically knowledgeable. I was always kind of trying to continue growing in what my thoughts and opinions were on things, and challenge myself and have conversations with people, even if they disagreed with me, to the point that I probably was annoying them, and just trying to better understand what I really believed. And I'd always thought that the concept of getting involved in politics was interesting, but I also thought that it'd be interesting to learn how to fly a plane one day. And it was a far off retirement, sort of, or closer to that time, once the kids are up and they're gone. And specifically, we attend the Well, and back in October of...
And for viewers or listeners that don't know, that's a church located in downtown Abilene.
Yes.
When you say the Well. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yeah, right across from Frontier, Texas.
Yeah.
And we've got a large college population. And there was a short sermon series on Amos that JR was doing in October of last year. And in Amos, what he's doing is he's calling out the mistreatment of the people. He's calling out the overtaxation. He's calling out the injustice that's being done by the rulers in Israel and Judah at the time, and telling them, like, y'all have got to be better than this. You've got to do better than this. You almost have a special calling to the people to take care of them because you are ruling. And so he kind of, with that large college population, I think he was talking to a lot of them, and he was saying, y'all are at an inflection point where you can be deciding right now what to go do. You can go be, specifically, he asked for people to go be righteous doctors and lawyers and police officers and teachers and members that serve their community. And at that time, right, we were a few weeks away from an election, and he stood there on the stage and he said, would one of you go run for office and be the sort of person that I actually want to vote for? And I felt something in that moment that typically had been reserved for forgiveness, maybe that I was withholding, or unrepentant sin, or the sorts of conversations where you almost want to grab the pastor afterwards and say, hey, man, we could have talked one-on-one if you knew something. We didn't have to...
And is that feeling, that's the feeling of being called?
I felt like that was the case. And honestly, I almost wanted to ignore it right at first. I think by the time we got out of that building that day, I put a couple blocks up in my head, and I went, okay, I have 6 kids. I have a wife who's not going to be interested in me getting involved with something. I'm working full-time, and I've been very blessed, and I do pretty good, for living here in Abilene. But I don't have a bank account that's sitting there that would allow me to just stop what I'm doing and go chase something else, right? And I've still got to provide for these kids. And so the first block was my job and my boss, and the second one was family. And within 2 or 3 weeks after that, completely unbidden, not telling anybody how I'd felt that Sunday, my wife asked me, or she told me, that she feels like I should be getting politically involved, and that maybe I should consider running for something. And then my boss told me a very similar thing about a week after that. We were talking about the aftermath of the election.
And so if you don't mind me interjecting, I mean,
Sure.
At any point did you say, you know what, I'll do that, but I think my first step ought to be really local, because this first step's really kind of big, no?
Well, that was a consideration. I looked at it once. So after the conversation with Haley, after the conversation with Amy, the owner of the company I work for, I told her in that conversation, I said, I don't even know what that looks like to go get involved in something, really, on a detailed level. And she said, I feel like if there's somebody that can figure it out, that you can. And kind of gave me the blessing to go search after it, and said, when it comes to the company, when it comes to my job, we'll figure it out, what it looks like if we decide to get involved in something like that. And So I spent a couple months end of this last year exploring what the different options were, things were, what it looked like to get elected, what it looked like to campaign, what it looked like from a financial standpoint, from anything else. And what I felt like I should do was take the biggest swing that felt like it was within reach. That if I felt like I was specifically called into something, that it was, I believe in a big God, and I believe in a God that does big things. And so I thought it was worth not putting him to the test, because I don't think that that's 100% right, but believing in these things I was calling into, and not diminishing my own self and saying, well, yeah, but I don't know if I'm that, right? If this is something I'm called into, let's go get into it. And so this was a seat that I looked at it. I looked at the amount of people that participate. I looked at the amount of money that gets raised, and I thought, you know what? These seem like big asks, but they seem like they're worth chasing after. And so from there, I'm so sorry. I lost my train of thought. I went somewhere and I was coming back.
Well, it's okay. If you don't mind, I'll interject
go
a
ahead.
question. Because what you have to do is win the primary as a
course.
Republican.
Yeah.
And then, I'm not saying it'll be a cakewalk, but you have a much easier task to win the general election as the Republican nominee than you have
It would seem that way.
as one of many now Republicans running for this race. So, daunting or not, you said, this is the answer. I'm going to do it. And have you felt confirmed all the way along now? You feel like I'm in a good place, or have you had thought, oh boy, God, what have you gotten me into?
It's been some of both of that. It's there's days where I sit there and I go, man, this is a little overwhelming, and then but it's been good too, as far as really having people support that I wasn't expecting to support. Having people come alongside and kind of be able to give good information, and I feel like I've learned a lot in this process, and that's something too. And I think that's where I was going a second ago. As far as wanting to swing for something that I think is big, part of it's because I feel called to run. I don't know that I've been called specifically into winning this election, right? I don't think that there's been a promise there, but I think if I'm going to follow this calling, I need to follow it to the best of my ability and with all the energy that I can. And so it's entirely possible that I'm being called to run for this because I'm supposed to meet somebody or somebodies that are going to help open doors down the road. I think it's possible that I'm supposed to run for this because there's some part of this process that I'm supposed to help have a voice in, or help change opinions, or what. I don't know. I'm trying to be very open to the Lord's calling, but at the same time, just go at it with as much as I can. And, if we end up surprising myself and surprising everybody else, and being able to garner enough support to really, really challenge for this thing, then I'm open to that as well.
So let me get to your website and some of your stated platform positions. Sure. And the first, I'm going to do this for each one, but this first one I really want to just actually read verbatim what you say on your website, because I'm fascinated by this. First off, you say you're not a career politician, but we've established that. We've established why you're running, and we've established that you even acknowledge it's an uphill climb, but that's why you're doing it. You feel called to this uphill climb. I get that. You say on your website you're a neighbor, and here's the part that's an exact quote: a neighbor who believes in limited government, fiscal responsibility, and individual liberty.
Yes, sir.
And then you say, and I want to get to this, including protecting Second Amendment rights. Now, I want to come back to that in a second, because I think we know that's the right to own and bear arms. Sure. Okay. Then you say a commitment to public service is shaped by real-world challenges, not political ambition.
Yeah.
So I want to put this to the test this way. We are sitting here on a date 24 hours after yet another horrific school shooting, this one at a Catholic school in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I got to confess, I don't even read all of the news any longer about the school shootings. It's so heartbreaking. And I want to just preemptively say that I, for one, am just so tired of the thoughts and prayers approach.
Yeah.
You chose to put Second Amendment rights on your website immediately following commitment to public service shaped by real-world challenges.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about these school shootings? What do you think?
I think that I understand the concept of thoughts and prayers not feeling like enough. I think that when I get back into that stuff, and I'm talking about individual liberty, and I'm talking about smaller government, in general, I don't feel like government's the answer to things, right? Second Amendment or not, I don't think that there's a way that we're going to legislate people into making better decisions when it comes to things like this. I think that the concept of having the freedom baked into the Constitution to own, to bear arms it's there right towards the beginning of the amendments on purpose. I think it's a very important thing for us to have. And I think when it comes to something like these school shootings, I think you're right. I mean, it's hard to really dive into every single one of them because it does seem like a very commonplace thing. And I think that
it's overwhelming. I mean, it's emotionally overwhelming.
It is. It is. I spent a long time last night looking at this one specifically. And I think a lot of this, when you look at it, guns are a common factor in these, right? Because they're all shootings. But another common factor that you find in these is all of these are carried out by people who are not mentally okay.
So and should the not mentally okay have the right to own and bear arms? I mean,
I think it's, yeah, I think
there are limits to the First Amendment. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And I don't want to press you as an expert on guns. You haven't positioned yourself that way. But again, we're just doing this a day after the shooting. Should a mentally, I'm not running for House District, District 71. So it doesn't matter what I think, right? But I have no problem putting a limitation on the Second Amendment for somebody who's a nut job, who has stated publicly that this is what they want to do, that their heroes are school shooters.
Yeah, I think I'm open to conversations on this. I am not going to be the person who comes out and says, yes, I believe absolutely that nut jobs should have access to guns. But I think what gets difficult is when we start getting involved with, legislation and making rules, and then we have to define what makes a nut job, right? Where is the threshold on?
Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia. I'd be real interested in talking about well-regulated, like the families in Minnesota.
No, and I get that completely, and that's what I'm saying. Like, those become difficult things, right? It's easy to say, should nut jobs have guns? No.
Yeah. How do you define it?
But then on the other hand, and you go, hey, does the Second Amendment say that people should have the right protected to have guns? Yes. Everything in between there gets messy. And so, yeah, I think that what happened there is a tragedy, and it's a tragedy every single time it happens. And thoughts and prayers, especially to people who maybe don't believe in prayers, feels very shallow. And
for the record, I believe in prayer.
And I'm not saying that about you at all. Yeah.
No. I'm just saying I think it's very shallow, and I believe deeply in prayer. One of my best friends wrote a best-selling book on prayer. I get it.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a mental health crisis there that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And that's absolutely true.
And that maybe there needs to be conversation about the relationship of guns to that crisis.
Yeah. And I appreciate your candid answer, because you say, I'm not a politician, and I don't think that politicians, or political ambition should be shaping our answers to these kind of things in the first place.
Yeah.
Deeply appreciate that, really do. I'll quickly say before we move on that I've had a couple of brushes with this personally.
Sure.
26 years ago, neighbors of mine were shot and killed in a church in Fort Worth.
Wow.
And it was a church shooting, and kind of like a school shooting yesterday at the Catholic school. And then I have a dear friend who shopped at the food store in Boulder, Colorado, that was shot up a few years ago, where people were killed. And she said, I had a shopping list. I had intended to go shopping that day, could have been at that time. And I never will forget that in social media, another friend, put the LOL laughing emoji when she described her pain. We got to get past this stuff.
Yeah.
And there's got to be some, look, I would love for you to lead the way in rational, thoughtful conversation.
Yeah.
Just dismissing people and the laughing emoji or the clown emoji is not what we need.
And it's not okay. And that's the thing. I mean, we can sit here and talk about mental health. We can talk about guns. We can talk about school shootings and the pain that they bring. But the truth is, like, if anybody had a magic answer to this, we wouldn't be talking about it right now. If there was a super simple solution, we wouldn't have this conversation. But the problem is, so often, because there's not a magic answer and there's not a solution that's just readily apparent, what it takes is actually having these conversations. And actually, when I say here's this and it's messy in the middle, we've got to be able to get into the mess, and we've got to be able to have conversations with people that think differently than us and are looking at things from a different angle, and work towards something that resembles a solution.
And you've already answered my follow-up, which was going to be, right, there's no magical solution. What it's called is hard work, collaborative conversation, mutual respect, finding an answer for the common good, and finding something and trying something, whether it's red flag laws or something. But that's a lot of hard work. And it's a lot of conversation, and it can never be dismissed or dismissive. One side dismisses the other. So I appreciate that very much. Appreciate the substantive conversation, and appreciate your attitude and willing to talk about it. You say on your website you're running to make sure the people of District 71 have a voice in Austin that answers to them, that doesn't answer to special interests or party bosses.
Sure.
Okay, so who are the party bosses?
Yeah, and this may be a conversation that prickles some people a little bit, but
are we about to have the part of the podcast that's very clickbait worthy coming up?
I hope not. I hope anything that I have to say is not going to end up being controversial, but I know it can come across that way sometimes. I think too often right now in politics, as a whole, and in politics within the Republican Party, whether it's at the national level, at the state level, wherever else, there's almost this expectation that people fall in line. When I say party bosses, I'm referring to the people that run the policy of the party. I'm referring to the governor, to the lieutenant governor, to the attorney general. And I'm not saying any of this to say that they're bad or that I'm against them or that I dislike the things that they're doing. But they're not an ultimate authority. And the founding of this country had to do with not having ultimate authority.
Right? In fact, if I read your position statement right, you would say, representing the people of District 71, the people are the authority.
Absolutely.
You're there to represent them.
Absolutely. And so when it comes to, when I say party bosses, right, if we're talking about, like, let's get specific. If we're talking about in Texas and you're talking about the governor and the lieutenant governor and the attorney general, when you look at the things they're doing, I like most of the stuff that they do. I'm in line with them on most things. But when push comes to shove and there's policy position or there's ideas or there's whatever else that is not what's actually best for the people of this district here, then that's when somebody has to be able to raise their hand and say, hey, let's figure this out a little bit and not just be expected to fall in line. And I think there's a lot of folks who, let me say this, and I'm going to back off it for a second, we can come back. There's not near enough room for nuance in our political conversations today. Whether it's left against right, whether it's this issue versus that issue, everything has to be so black and white, there's no nuance. And so bringing that back, whenever we come to something like party politics, for people that aren't willing to have any sort of nuance on something, they're going to look at you and they're going to go, you either voted with the governor or you didn't. You either agreed with everything on the Republican Party platform or you didn't. And my thing is, I'm running as a Republican. I believe in conservative government. I believe in those three things that we listed out, right? Smaller government, individual liberty, fiscal responsibility. Like, I think those are the things that if you look back at our country's founding, those are the three things that they're founded on. In
fact, yeah, absolutely 100%. I just want to quickly say, and to say to King George, hey, you're not our king. We're revolting.
Sure.
No more.
Yeah. And so I want to be measured not by the label Republican. I want to be measured by my commitment to those three values that our country was founded on.
So Joshua, let me ask you, man, I'm vibing with everything you're saying. I get it. I really do. And I want to ask you, are you staking claim to a persona in politics that says collaborating with others and compromising with others is not a bad thing? And we ought to get along with people, and we ought to be kind to one another.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that should be a controversial statement, right? We should be able to work with other people and work with even people that we disagree with on things. I think in the interview that I did up here last week, right, one of the last things I said was I believe that the things that are good for Abilene, the people in Abilene know best. And I think I said Sweetwater as well. I don't think that's true of only these two cities.
But not Merkel. Not Merkel.
Hey, listen.
Nothing
this
good ever comes from Merkel.
This goes for every city in the district, but it goes for the cities outside as well. It goes for the places where I disagree with the majority of people politically.
Wait, your wife's from Merkel.
Yeah, she is.
Okay, so we got to include Merkel.
Yeah. But this is true for the people of Houston as well, right? And the majority of folks there tend to elect people who are on the Democratic side of things and maybe on the slightly bigger government side of things, and
or sometimes radically on the side
maybe radically so
of bigger government.
But in that same way, I think that the people in Houston know what's best for the people in Houston. I have chosen not to live next door to millions of other people. But some people, that's the choice they've made, or that's where their career's taken them, or that's where they've grown up. And from a policy perspective, there's some things that make more sense or different sense if you live on 40 acres and your next neighbor you've got to, cross a creek and drive a truck to get to, or you live in a district that, you could nearly throw a rock from one side to the other of. It's not all going to be the same, which goes into the limited government side of things there, in that I think that I don't want to get too much into like federal politics because it's not really what we're running for here. But there's this idea that seems that government just continues to grow and grow and grow. And the more government that we're doing, the further away from my house or your house or anybody else's house, the harder it's going to be to find common ground on stuff.
Well, I think it's absolutely fine to take something like what you just said regarding our federal government, that it grows and grows and never decreases. Yeah. People say, well, but our current president, Donald Trump, his policies are great. Man, our debt and spending has grown under him exponentially. I mean, let's just be honest about it. I don't care if you got an R or a D after your name. If you're president, you preside over an ever-increasing debt and an ever-increasing size of government. So taking that principle, you're saying locally and state, you wish it wasn't that way. Fair enough?
Yeah, I think the further government is being done away from the people who, like we said earlier, they are the ones in charge, right? We told King George, that we weren't going to be a part of his system anymore, that we're going to do our own thing. And we should still have that spirit of we're going to do our own thing. And so, yeah, when it comes to your city government, I'm okay with city governments from one city to the next across the state and across the country being radically different from each other and serving the individual needs and the wants of the people there locally. And then, stepping up from there through, county government and state government and the federal government, the further it gets out, the less I feel like it should be doing, right? Because when the federal government wants to write policy for or against something that's controversial, you're going to have a hard time getting buy-in from people all the way across the country. The values, to me, that make somebody American are the values that were there at the founding, right? So it was agreeing to defend each other. It was agreeing to, help protect each other's livelihoods and their freedoms. But when we get into the nitty-gritty, you and I are going to have a much easier time at this table here, compromising, having conversations, disagreeing, and finding something that works for both of us right here. Much easier than if you and I are having to do that with 1,000 other people and have that conversation with 1,000 other people in Illinois or Montana or wherever else.
So you're a states' rights guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the federal government, constitutionally, it lined out very specific things that they were supposed to be doing in the enumerated powers, and says everything, that hasn't been laid out for the federal government to doing needs to be reserved to the states. And I almost take that same frame of mind when I look at the state government and we go, okay, what are the essential things the state government needs to be doing? And if it's not those things, then let's reserve them to the county or the city or wherever else. One, I think you probably get much more efficient government that way. And two, I think you probably get better representation if the decisions that are getting made are closer to you.
Are you concerned? We mentioned something that's federal and made a local comparison, and I want to just take one more step into the federal pool, if you will, and use an example. Does it concern you? You mentioned again on your website the only amendment you did mention was the Second Amendment, but I get why. I mean, it's a big Texas thing, the right to bear arms. I get it. We didn't talk about the First Amendment, the right to free speech, but there are limits to that, because you can't yell fire in a crowded studio or a theater, for example. But I'm also concerned these days about our Fifth Amendment rights and due process. And what about what's going on in the world today federally and applying it locally? Would you be okay with local police or local law enforcement wearing masks, throwing people in vans and driving them away, and those people end up in a foreign country in a jail somewhere? And what can you share your personal thoughts about that and apply it locally?
Yeah, I think on one hand, law enforcement has a hard job. I think that anything that you're doing like that, and I think at a certain point, we have to allow them a little bit of room to operate. But in the same breath, if you take some of those videos that you've seen like that, people in masks, grabbing somebody on the street, putting them in a van, there's a lot of people that I know around here that if that same thing happened, like guns are probably coming unholstered, and now people are fighting with the cops. I think that we have to.
So, are you saying maybe that obviously we're talking about ICE, that they ought to rein that back some, take the masks off, show a warrant? These are due process essentials, right? You're bad. You and I have a right, if we're stopped today by an Abilene police officer, to see their face, to see their badge number, to hear them say their badge number, to hear them say their name. They identify themselves, and if they're going to arrest us, they have to have probable cause and a warrant.
Sure.
Those are essentials. Those are fundamentals, it seems to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's whenever I get into, like, when I say, okay, the mask thing or whatever. I don't want to say anything that's going to be so, this specific way that you operate yourself is bad. But from an optic standpoint, from everything else like that, it certainly doesn't look like anybody's having the time to identify or find out why they're being arrested or anything else like that. And so if operationally or whatever else, there's a reason to have a mask in place, maybe that makes sense, right? I've heard people talk about, the fact that at times the operation they are doing is maybe in opposition to the cartel and worrying about stuff like that. I think that's valid, but I think there's a way that you can approach somebody in a mask and still say, hey, I'm such and such, and I'm with this agency, and you're under arrest, and these are the reasons why, and
yeah, that makes sense.
You know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. So I don't want to jump on and go, oh, no, let's not do masks, because that's what I was saying about leaving a little bit of grace there for the difficulty in the operations.
To me, it's more the principle of not identifying yourself and, again, giving somebody their rights.
Absolutely.
Due process is something. If you set foot in our country, you are given the right of due process. Yeah. I've traveled extensively in developing nations and nations where if you got arrested, the presumption was you were assumed guilty. Sure. And those are places where you watch your step, because you don't want to get arrested and you don't want to sit in a jail for 9 months or even 9 hours, wrongly so.
And those are countries that can't write and sing songs about freedom the way that we do, right? Yeah. I mean, we claim a very specific heritage in freedom, and it's something that has to be protected, and it's something that we do have to keep things in check and make sure that it doesn't slip away from us. And some of it is conversations like this that are hard. I've had conversations with people who are talking about, who would disagree with you there when you say that when you step into our country, right, you get due process rights. And they go, well, actually, this is for citizens.
Well, they probably ought to take a course in constitutional law 101. They ought to just quit Googling things and reading the first thing that they find, because we're a constitutional democracy. Or maybe we're not. Seems like the Constitution ought to inform them. They're just dead wrong. I mean,
and the Constitution allows the Supreme Court to weigh in and to define things when they're not clear sometimes. And up to this point, the Supreme Court has said that when we're talking about these rights, that they belong to everybody that's in the country. Now, if as a country there's a shift and people want to have that conversation about the Supreme Court changing that and saying, actually, there's some things that only apply to citizens, if the Supreme Court wants to weigh in, or if we want to get some states together and have a constitutional amendment for it, I mean, let's have it, right? I'm all about having conversations and trying to figure these things out. But we don't get to just decide today because there's something that we don't like that's happening, or because, or because they do like that something's happening, that they get to just shift the rules in the way that they have conversations, and magically the Constitution is rewritten. It's not. It's the same thing for the folks who are super Second Amendment, and they hear somebody go, well, actually, at the time the Constitution was this and that, and the way we should apply it today. Those people too, I'm open to having conversations with them. And if there needs to be a shift and there needs to be, stuff brought before the Supreme Court, and there needs to be amendments to the Constitution, there's a reason why it's such a high bar to change things in that manner, because...
Yeah, it's a 2/3 vote of the Congress.
Yeah, and so I think those are I'm open to having any of those conversations. I don't think most of them probably get very far, because I don't think that you're going to find that many people that are all on the same page about it. But so in that same way, you're not going to find 2/3 of states that are going to say, hey, actually the Second Amendment, you really actually can restrict it, and we're going to change the Second Amendment. You're probably also not going to find 2/3 of people who say, actually due process rights only belong to citizens.
So I appreciate the candid conversation, and I get what you're saying relative to limited government. I personally, that's appealing to me. I get what you're saying about fiscal responsibility, and again, personally, that's appealing to me. I do understand when you say that our individual liberties have to be protected. Again, appealing to me. That all sounds fantastic. How would you apply that to your statement on your website about lowering taxes, smaller government, and solutions that put Texas families first? I think that's how you put it. And I'll jump to a specific. Well, you know what? Before I jump to a specific, I'll let you respond to that. How do you frame all of that in terms of specific realities?
Specific realities? Yeah. So when we say they're right, putting Texas families first.
Yeah.
When I say families, it's not just, me, my wife, my kids, my neighbors, but it goes back to the concept we were talking about of the people, being the people in charge of the government, right? And so typically, actually, whenever I'll tier that, I'll say federal, state, county, city, church, neighborhood, family, right? If we're really spreading them all the way out like that. And so, to me, the family being the representative of the people are the ones that are in charge. And so, when we're talking about smaller government and fiscal responsibility, I think those things go hand in hand. I think typically, if we're making the government smaller, if we're bringing things back locally, if we're, doing less overall, you're going to spend less money, because it's not going to be as big of a lift even to do the things that you want to do. And so, yeah, I think that, I think in general, the concepts of the founding, especially when we're talking about individual liberty, also means that family kind of gets to decide for themselves what things look like, or from the family to the individual, that what their life looks like, and that pursuit of happiness, and that carrying out of their life, that they need to be able to make those decisions for themselves. And so,
what about school choice? You're for it or against it?
School choice, I okay, I grew up homeschooled. My wife grew up homeschooled. I joke with people that I'm a first grade dropout because actually until we went to Turkey, I went to a private school in San Antonio. My mom thought we were going to go to Turkey. She was going to carry on with the same curriculum and that we'd get back to San Antonio afterwards and we'd re-enroll right in the same school. Didn't happen. I laid out for you kind of our journey. And so that's the way we went. We have 6 children. 4 of them are school-aged right now. We're homeschooling them. And so on the surface of the term school choice, absolutely for school choice. I think that goes into the individual liberty piece. I think that parents absolutely have the right and the responsibility to choose the things that are best for their children and to guide what their education looks like. When it comes to school choice and the way that it was presented legislatively, at this point, what got presented was voted on and got passed and has been signed into law. And it does concern me a little bit from the limited government side of things as far as we're taking something, we're saying, hey, this is going to be more freedom, and then you're kind of creating slightly bigger government in order to do it. And so I think the important thing now is to watch it as it goes forward and say, hey, we need to really keep tabs on this. And we need to make sure that this doesn't become something else wasteful that the government's doing. I'm concerned a little bit when it comes to getting public dollars involved in private schools and in homeschool families and stuff like that, that there's, and maybe not as it's written now, but maybe for down the road, that there's the possibility for doors to be opened into more government control of those things. And so school choice is an interesting one because it kind of, in my head, puts at odds, right, a couple of those things, the limited government piece versus the individual liberty piece. Because on an individual liberty standpoint, I think it's great. On a small government standpoint, I think it's yet to be seen. And I think it's something we just need to be really careful of because...
And I would be concerned about the people in our communities who don't enjoy a 2-parent household and being able to homeschool, and their kids are going to gravitate certainly toward a public school and robbing those people of dollars to teach their kids. I'm concerned about them. I don't know that they even have a voice much any longer in our state government. Would you be a voice for them? I understand you and your family. I understand you go to a church. And I understand you clicked it through and all the way. You mentioned church, but you didn't mention mosque or synagogue. I don't think that's intentional on your part, but you do acknowledge that your experience is not everybody's experience, right?
Sure.
I feel like that was adversarial. I don't mean that to be adversarial. I mean we've got a big community even in Abilene of people who are not Christian or who can't. They are not in a position where they're going to be able to homeschool their kids. So I just say, what about them?
Absolutely. And to speak to the church point, whenever I say city, church, neighborhood, family, a lot of these things can be maybe not reorganized top to bottom, but part of government is the consent of the governed, right? If somebody is, I'm not looking for the church to be ruling everybody necessarily, but if you in your life have submitted some authority to God or to the church, or if you're of another faith, authority there, that's where I was slotting that there. And when it comes to the thought of some people not being able to, afford alternative options, or maybe not be in a position where that's something that's a possibility, I completely understand that. That's part of why I have some of these concerns too. That's part of why on my website, one of the things I have put as kind of a plank there is quality education, because I do feel very blessed to be in a position that we can have my wife at home and be schooling our children at home. But I also know that my kids are going to live and grow up. They're going to grow up and live in a society that is primarily made up of people who went to public school. And so I want to be a voice for them. I want to make sure that they're getting the best opportunities possible as well. Because it doesn't just affect them. It also, selfishly a little bit, it affects my kids too. It affects, the next generations of people. And so, Yeah, whenever we talk about funding for schools and stuff like that, I think that it's definitely something that we need to keep an eye on as far as, making sure that they have the budgets that they need, but at the same time doing accountability and making sure those budgets are spent where they need to be spent so that we can, because I don't think that more dollars always equals or better outcomes, or that more dollars always equals better test scores, right? It certainly can help if it's applied properly.
If you ask how much it costs to educate Lincoln,
Sure.
the answer is not a thing. That was the ultimate example of good return on investment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So one last question just about the race, and then we'll just kind of bring it home with just general thoughts about Abilene and what you'd like to see. And I can't say how much I appreciate the candid conversation. I love it. I hope the viewers love it. I wonder, you realize you're running for Stan Lambert's seat, obviously.
Yes, sir.
And you do know that, obviously, last year he was faced unexpectedly, very surprisingly, really, I think maybe for the first time we've seen this. He had a primary opponent who now also is one of your opponents. Yeah. So you have that same primary opponent who doesn't live here all the time. To be fair, she owns property here and considers herself a resident, but also, to be fair, has a residence in the Metroplex.
Sure.
At least did at that time.
Sure.
I don't know the situation today. I'll certainly ask her if she comes
Yeah.
on the podcast. So what are your thoughts about that? And were you actively engaging at that time in any kind of thought world or conversational world that you'd be willing to share? Did you support Stan? Did you support Liz Case, who's now one of your opponents, or did you give much thought to it at all?
Yeah. So at the time, I supported Stan in that last elections, primarily because of some of these things we've talked about, and there's going to be people out in Abilene that disagree with me on this, but about standing up to party bosses, right? Because ultimately, there's a lot of people who kind of view him as not being that.
He certainly did.
On the issue of school choice specifically, because that's what we're talking about, in 2023, Stan Lambert and some of those other folks, some of those other Republicans in the Texas House are the reason why it didn't get passed in 2023. And it's why that whole group of people got primaried as hard as they did. It's why Liz Case gets the money from the governor and gets the visit from the governor to help campaign. And school choice was one of those things that, as a homeschool dad, doesn't maybe affect me as much or as personally. And so it wasn't necessarily something that I had a strong opinion on one way or another. But I appreciated in 2023 watching a representative go, okay, hey, I'm actually not sure that this bill as it stands right now is the best thing for my district, right? When the governor and the national party and everybody else wants to push this thing.
And to be fair, ultimately, changes were made to a point that Stan did vote for it and could support it.
Yeah, and honestly, I had a little bit of frustration even there, right? Because I felt like that race in 24 was, I don't want to say it was single issue, but there was a big single issue that was,
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I don't know how many flyers I got a day from either campaign, and every one of them had to do with school choice and had to do with, voting with Democrats against it or whatever else the thing was. And it was hard for me then to go watch his vote for school choice in a version of it that is probably better than what was presented in 23, but the tenacity that it was spoken out against, I didn't feel like there was enough change from being that tenacious about it to suddenly going, well, we've got some changes and it's good now. I think it's better than the 23 version, but I don't know that it's necessarily, suddenly something that somebody who ran so hard against it and was kind of staking their claim on it. And so I don't hold any ill will towards Stan Lambert or to Liz Case. I think they're both, they've got their opinions and they're going out there and they're fighting for the things that they believe in. But yeah, I forget exactly even what you asked at this point. At the beginning, we're just sitting here talking.
It's such a good talk. I don't know that I remember. I tell you,
Trying to land the plane.
well, and as we try to land the plane in the conversation, I would. What is your? We've talked a lot about it,
Sure.
so I think I can anticipate the answer. But you get in the elevator with somebody downtown at the Enterprise Building, and you've got about 18 floors, and they say, "Hey, before we get up to floor 18, tell me why I ought to vote for you." What's your elevator speech?
My elevator speech, it's pretty simple. I know what it's like to live and work and raise a family in Abilene. I've got family in Merkel, in Hawley. I've got, friends in Clyde and in Hanson and Sweetwater. And the community of people that I'm surrounded with are involved here constantly and are working in it. And so when the state does things that are consequential to the people here, I think I might feel it before some of these other candidates in this race. And so when I say voice for the people, I know that's a common thing to be said, but I really think that there's something to that there. And then if obviously the elevator's getting pretty high at this point. But yeah, those three things, right? Individual liberty, smaller government, fiscal responsibility. I'll say, hey, if you want those things and you pride yourself in those three things, that's what you're going to get from me. Even if it's not what seems popular at the time, or even if it's not what the party is, that's how I want to be measured. Is did I deliver on those points?
Well, you delivered on a good elevator speech. I like it, and I want to just back away from all the politics.
Sure.
Just last question. Just thinking about Abilene, what would you like to see in Abilene the next 10 or 20 years? We've got big changes coming. We've got the data centers, not just one, but now in Ewan and Shackleford County, they're essentially right outside Abilene city limits. We've got, the 3 universities, but who knows? Maybe a public university will come into Abilene. I mean, who knows? What would you like to see? So I asked that question to somebody, and they said, I'd really like to see a super target. Well, that's pretty granular, that's pretty specific. But what would you like to see?
Yeah, I think there's man, it depends on how you take that question, I guess, right? Super target's valid. If we're in that category of things, I'd love to see another HEB. Coming from somebody who worked there, I think competition even amongst HEBs is good, and we'd get a better one on 14th and, a bright, shiny new one. I'm super excited about seeing the B-21s come in the next couple of years. With all the work that we do out there at Dyess and kind of getting to see behind the curtains as stuff gets built and we get ready, I'm completely jazzed for that. Again, grew up in, I hate the term Air Force brat, but, grew up getting to see all the different planes. And
if you're elected, could you get us a seat on like one of the first rides? Because I'd really like to ride on it.
Man, I'm not promising anything.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, I love those. Those are. What else?
I think from kind of more city standpoint, the popular thing is roads, but I think they're doing good work on the roads. I do think as we build more and more and we stretch out more and more and there's more concrete down, I think that there's definitely drainage issues that need to be addressed. I don't necessarily feel like I've got issues with potholes anymore as far as that goes, but there's definitely some nights where you get a good rain, and it was probably a month or two ago. We had a real good rain. I was trying to get to Domino's one night and grab some pizza, and I think I had to go 3 different routes, and I drive a 15-passenger van. I was thinking, it hasn't rained in a week or two. What are we doing? And so I think there's a lot that needs to be done here, but I also think this place is special, and so I don't want to sit here like I'm saying, I don't want to make a list of like, here's all the ways that Abilene can be better, because Abilene's good. I've lived different places. I've had, experience other places, and this is where I want to be, with its goods, with its bads, with roads that need a kayak sometime. I'm excited for the future of it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Sure.
You've been nothing if not transparent, honest. I'm assuming transparent. Either that or the guy who says he's not a politician is the best politician ever.
Sure.
So it's been an engaging conversation. I really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, hey, and
I really do.
I appreciate you saying that, and that transparency is something that I want to be a hallmark of this campaign. I want to be reachable. Like you said at the beginning, the phone number that's on my website, it will ring in my pocket. I mean, if somebody is watching this and they want to test it, go to the website, call the phone number. I'll answer it. I'll ask you how far you are into the podcast. The Facebook, if you get a hold of it on there, come straight to me. The email address that's on the website, come straight to me. It's possible that we get far enough into this campaign and maybe things really kick off, and eventually I've got to have some people help with that stuff. But my commitment is to being accessible, to being transparent, and to trying to figure out what it is that, we need to do about this stuff.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us here in this episode of Abilene People. I want to give a big shout out to our producer, Travis Corrigan, TCB, taking care of business, making it all happen over there on the switcher board. And I want to thank you, as I said, for joining us. And I want to make sure you know that we'll continue to invite the most interesting people in Abilene to come here on the podcast, including all those who are running now for, it's almost like a football team now. Running for State House District 71. Today's guest, Joshua. Sorry. Wow.
Whoa.
Why did I just do that? I think it's because early on I entered Joseph in my phone.
There you go.
And then I couldn't find you. It's Joshua.
Joshua, yes, sir.
Joshua Ohlemacher.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for joining us. We will see you next time here on Abilene People.